Hey guys, it's Navonod. So I put this video up a couple days back, and it was just a quick little video. I almost put another one up last night where I had a 14-1 chip deficit, came back and got the win. But they were both kind of about just not punting buy-ins off and just staying in the game until the proverbial fat lady sings. And at the end, I asked about how you guys would like me to go over this material. There was a little bit of a preview, sneak peek kind of a thing at the end of the video called Navonod on Motivation, Don't Punt, something like that. But it must not have resonated with my normal viewership, and definitely did not resonate with the YouTube search engine algorithms. So I am left almost, I did have a couple of comments, but um, I'm left pretty close to just trying to do what I think is the best thing to do. Because even the comment or comments I got were sort of ambiguous and like, yeah, we would hope that you would go into all of this depth, but understand that you do a lot of work, and it was just, very kind and thoughtful stuff, but not much of it, just one or two. So anyway, I guess what we're going to do is we're just going to go through this slideshow that was previewed, and just talk about what each slide means, and then I'm going to give you guys another chance to chime in and tell me how you want me to go through the material. Really need to get this channel moving. Been at it for a couple years now, and everybody seems to really enjoy the content that gets their hands on the content, or a lot of people do. But I'm not getting the views and responses, probably because I don't understand the YouTube search algorithms. But yeah, guys, if you can do me a favor there, I get a lot of good, positive, encouraging, affirmations and thanks and that sort of thing. Plenty of, well, enough students for the amount of time that I have to coach in the first place. That's not a problem, but with this real lack of time that I have in my life as of late, I want to just continue to do this YouTube channel. I enjoy it. I really do enjoy it as a sort of creative, what do you call that? A creative outlet? Yeah, creative outlet. And I enjoy doing things that other people enjoy. But if you could just help me out, I mean, there's no Patreon, there's no charging, there's no cost, but um, whatever, like, I don't know what the algorithms are looking for, but I assume that there's ways of, well, I would think that it has something to do with like how many of my viewers watch and how fast and how much of it they kind of tolerate, like if they watch it till the end or turn it off in 5 seconds, or how often it's searched, how often it's shared maybe. But if you do know and you could help me out in that department, I would really appreciate it. I would really want to get over 1,000 subscribers. Um, to, like, not that it's not worth it to touch, a couple of people and help a couple of people here and there. But you know, it would be a lot more worth it if I was touching a lot more people, something like that. So yeah, throw me a bone, guys, if you can. If you know anything about any of it and you can do a thing to help me get more, views, I'll try to turn the views into subscribers. I think I can make that my job. And if you're viewing this and you've seen my videos before and you appreciate them, just hit that subscribe button. So yeah, with that said, we're going to get right on into this. I don't think I'm going to even bother to talk about what Bruce Lee meant by that. But the next slide, coincidentally, is about elegance, efficiency, simplicity, and precision. So this is, to me, the final goal. Like, this is really what you're trying to do as you approach learning no limit hold'em strategy, is you're trying to get the information, the strategic information that's relevant, that matters, that's going to win you money, help you to not lose money, kind of max out your wins and minimize your losses. You're looking for that. And what that is really is this. It's just learning how to make the most effective and efficient use of each part of your range. You're only going to be dealt so many useful hands. So you need to be able to play them and in a way that squeezes out all of the value that you can squeeze out of them. And if we plan our lines precisely, and we know what kinds of adjustments to make against what kind of villains, and we start with the right ranges and we use them in the right ways, And then there's nothing left at that point but just betting. And then if we know what our value targets are when we're value betting, and if we know kind of what our range looks like to our opponent, what we're repping, then we can use every chip that we put in the pot to maximum effect. And that really is the goal. That's kind of the end game, is we want efficiency. We don't want to waste hands. An example of this would be we have King 10 suited on the button, and a player open raises on the cutoff, and we're playing 6 max online, NL 25 say, and we decide to 3-bet King 10 suited. It's like, well, I mean, why not 3-bet King 8 suited? You know, why not 3-bet King 7 suited? Is it going to be that much different? But you can't call with King 7 suited, you can't call with King 8 suited, and you can call with King 10 suited, or like King Jack offsuit. You know, hands like that, Queen Jack suited, button versus cutoff. You know, you don't want to bluff with hands that you can flat with. It doesn't make sense to do that. You're wasting hands that way. And the same thing happens post flop when you're betting the middle of your range. It's like, it's a wasteful thing to do, and we don't get that many chances to make money, so we have to make the best use of them. And that's really the name of the game as far as I can tell. My approach really is going to be, and I'm going to go over all this stuff, and then probably, depending on the comments I get and the input I receive, I'm probably going to go back and make videos on each one of these topics. And you know, I've hit a lot of these and covered a lot of these topics in the past, but you know, I get I don't know if better is the right way to say it. I mean, yeah, sure, I get better at poker, but I get more clarity in my thought process the more I think about these things. And so a video I might have done a year ago on why we play the hands that we play pre-flop, you know, it's going to be a little bit not that much different, actually. I'm not thinking that much differently about it, but the way that I can get the information across, I think, will be more efficient, you know, with more simplicity and clarity. So I think I might just go back and touch on all of the concepts we're going to be talking about or skimming through in this video. I may go back then and kind of ISO in on each one of these concepts and do a specific video on each one. So let me know what you think about that idea, how you feel about that. But yeah, the Navonod no limit hold'em approach, like, this to me is poker. There just isn't anything else major to talk about, and everything else there is to talk about kind of comes out of these notions. If you understand how to construct your pre-flop ranges, like, you know, we play some hands, we don't play all hands, we raise some of the time, we call some of the time. Well, why exactly is it that we do this instead of that? Or why does a good player do this instead of that? Or why does a GTO strategy do this thing instead of that thing with this hand and not that hand? And when you can boil that down, I mean, that's what it all comes down to. You know, in the final analysis, that's what there is, right? You've got hands that you're playing, chips that you're using to play, and the more you can focus in on first concepts, or first, like, primaries, fundamentals, I mean, the more you can kind of go in deep and look at what I call the root of a thing. And this is something I also borrowed from Bruce Lee. The Tao of Jeet Kune Do is a really good read, whether you're a martial artist or not. I think it's really a good philosophy book. It's a good martial arts philosophy book, but it's also just a good introduction to Zen thinking for a Western mind. I think, like, that's how I came to any notion of Zen in the very first place. But he had this idea that you want to start with the root, and once you understand the root of a tree, you know all of its leaves. You don't have to go to each leaf and say, you know, is this one a maple leaf? Is this one a maple leaf? Is that one a maple leaf? If you know the root, you know they're all maple leaves. And then if one of them appears to not be a maple leaf, you don't even have to worry about whether it actually is or actually is not. You know it really is a maple leaf. You just have to figure out why it doesn't look like one to you. So once you understand these, the word is escaping me, first concepts, these first, well, the primaries, the fundamentals, the root concepts, then you don't have to worry about every leaf on the tree. You know the entire tree just by knowing its roots. So that's kind of always been my approach to trying to learn and study and teach and coach, is to look at the root of a thing. And it's all about efficiency. Best I can tell, the hands that you play or don't play come down to showdown value, domination, synergy, nut potential. And then we've got a couple secondary features, which are going to be like um, uh, utility, maybe you could say, but really that's just a combination of all the different factors. Like a hand like King Queen suited, I think plays a little bit better from early position at like a full ring game than a lot of hands, because you don't know quite what's going to happen and how you're going to be going to the flop when you open from first position at a full ring game. And King Queen suited has like this utility in that it plays pretty good against one opponent. It plays pretty well against two or three or four. So, but I don't know that that's its own. It's not a fundamental factor, because really that just means that it has a healthy combination of the other factors. You know, it has the potential to flop big hands. It has synergy. It's going to be able to flop big draws and hit boards in unexpected ways. And it's got, king high, queen high. It's got a pretty good chance for domination. And it's like just equity versus random or showdown value, or its intrinsic like value, or how good it is at winning showdowns. King high is just under ace high, is just under a pair, so it's got kind of a lot going for it. So you could look at utility as, I think, a secondary factor. Same with like blocker effects, because blocker effects don't really tell us how we're going to make money post flop. They just kind of help us to limit how often we're going to make it post flop. So that would be a secondary feature. And when I say there's really two secondary features, what I'm usually referring to are blocker effects, which just kind of increase our fold equity, and board coverage, which again isn't really that much about a specific hand in a vacuum. It only really makes sense in terms of the range as a whole. So I don't think you really want to look at that as a fundamental factor. It doesn't help you make money with the hand. Not really. It makes your entire range better. But we'll talk about that. But yeah, construct good ranges. Understand polarization. Get your frequencies in the right ballpark. And understand the kind of the rock, paper, scissors and the ace, king, queen games and how they map onto poker, or how poker maps onto each of those concepts individually. And then understand basic bet theory. I mean, really, if you understand how the money goes in, matters. And the way the money goes in best for you is going to be different when you have different parts of your range. Understanding basic bet theory, that the more you bet, and that can mean bigger you bet, or the more times you bet, the more streets you bet. Either way you look at it, or well, you want to look at it in both ways. The more you bet, the more aggressive you get, the more your opponent folds, and the stronger his continuance range becomes. And also, the more condensed his range gets, as long as he is exactly calling and not ever raising. But that is such a simple thing, but it's not that just knowing that and understanding that sentence as being a true statement, or that phrase as being a true statement, that's not that valuable. Understanding the implications of that are super valuable. It's like everything. It's just such a big deal. So we need to look at that, recognize that, know what that's telling us, know what it means. And you can use Navonod's line, I think, to help you with that. It tells you at least where the incentive comes. Where is the incentive? Where am I in this spectrum that I call Navonod's line? And if I'm at the middle of it, where I've got like a bluff catcher, it's got showdown value, but it's not a value or a nut value hand, it's not a draw, it's not air, somewhere in the middle there, then do I have incentive to aggress? Or like, how does money, if money's going to go into this pot, who should put it there in what way to give me the highest EV? And you'll find that the incentive for aggression is on the poles, which kind of makes sense, right? That's why you polarize ranges when you can, when it makes sense to. Balance as needed, exploit where possible. That's it. And you guys know that if you've watched my heads up concept videos or watched me play heads up poker, that I'm always talking about looking for a clear path to victory. We should always be trying to find the thing that we can most easily exploit, and exploit the hardest. And then I think we should just attack that. Look for that path to victory and go after it. Don't worry about tapping on the glass. That's my philosophy. Which is a little meta. It's not exactly fundamental, but I do think it's right most of the time. So yeah, showdown value. What do I mean by this? Showdown value or hot and cold equity. It's just like if all the money went in pre-flop, if there's no betting post-flop, or if the hand just goes check, 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 how often are you going to win? Or yeah, just if there's no betting, what is your hot and cold equity? Or if all of the betting happens before the flop, that's important. That's like how often you're actually going to win. And how often you're actually going to win is important. Or it's how often you're actually going to win, or how often you could win. Now, the problem with that when you actually have money behind is if somebody knows how to play their ranges properly and knows how to utilize each part of their overall hand range the right way, then they're going to put a lot of pressure on you to not allow you to easily realize all of your showdown value. But it's kind of like that's on your opponent. The onus is on your opponent to stop you from realizing all of your equity, or to getting your showdownable hands to showdown without taking on a bunch of reverse implied odds. That's the onus of that is on your opponent, but your hand still has this intrinsic value. It's like the difference between taking a set mine with pocket deuces and a set mine with pocket eights. When all of the value is coming from the set mines, there's not much difference. But it's almost never the case that all of the value is coming from set mining, right? Like sometimes you just have like a really close decision. Maybe you don't have quite the implied odds, or maybe you don't think your opponent's range is quite strong enough that it's going to pay you off a lot when you do hit a set, or you don't think your opponent's bad enough and he's not going to overplay hands, or he's not going to get overly sticky or overly aggressive, and should I take this showdown, or should I take this set mine, or should I not? And you look at pocket twos and you think, no, I think I'm not going to take this set mine. But you look at pocket eights and you think, yeah, I think I am going to take this set mine. And is that logical or rational? Well, it usually is. And it's not just because of the implied and reverse implied odds that come from oversetting somebody or getting overset yourself. Most of the difference at most stack depths is going to come from just the intrinsic showdown value, how often you're actually able to get pocket eights to showdown and win with them. It's way more often than pocket twos, and that does matter. How much does it matter relative to the implied odds that come from set mining? Well, that depends on the stack depths and your opponent's mistakes and their tendencies and their propensities, so on. Synergy, that's another one, and that's just like suited connectivity, or having suited connecting hands, hands that have two cards that play well together. That's one of those synergistic situations where you can look at a thing and say, with this hand 9-8 suited, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And then there's some hands like Ace 8 offsuit where you really can't say that because the cards don't do anything together. They don't interact in any meaningful way. But hands like 9-8 suited, they do have that synergy, and that synergy does matter. It's going to allow you to develop strategies specifically against opponents that you understand, and it's going to allow you to actualize more of your equity across more boards. Domination. It's just how often you're going to have like a good top pair top kicker or a top pair second kicker, and your opponent's going to make a top pair third kicker. Just for instance, it's making a good hand at the same time your opponent's able to make and likely to make a good but second best hand. Like how often does that happen? When you've got pocket aces, that happens all the time because you'll always have an overpair or a set. You can't help but have an overpair or a set with pocket aces. So your opponent's always going to have potential to make a weaker overpair, a top pair that's beat, a second best set even in some cases. So you're always going to dominate some percent of your opponent's range, and you're usually going to dominate a lot of your opponent's range when you have pocket aces. That's one of the things that makes it so profitable. And it really is so profitable. If you're still thinking like pocket aces, they lose. How did that go? they win small pots and lose big pots, then I don't, just stop it. It's insanity. Um, it's not true. It's not true for one thing, and even if it were true, then it would have to be the case that it was winning so many pots that it still, you know, worked out. Excuse me, that's my celebratory coffee. In unrelated news, Michigan, that's where I'm living at present, just passed they just legalized recreational marijuana. And even though I literally do not smoke marijuana, I just can't help but be super excited. I'm like looking at our society and our culture and just thinking, wow, I'm so proud of you, culture. You're growing up. You're all growing up, or you're getting there, right? Um, so yeah, it's an interesting day in that way. Anyway, about poker. Don't play poker and smoke pot at the same time, unless that's, well, what you like to do, I guess. Nut potential, chunky equity. Nut potential is just how often, it's like the relative frequency of flopping a hand that you are happy to get all of the money with, all of the money in on the flop with. That would be a good way to think of it. But it could actually even be not on the flop. But often, well, I guess it's just a lot better to have nut potential that happens most often on the flop. In other words, needs fewer hands to make. Well, I guess really, I was going to say, in other words, uses or needs or requires fewer cards to actually hit. So like pocket pairs is what it really means. But there's also the nut potential of straight draws and flush draws getting there on turns and rivers, or actually having some kind of a pocket pair that sets on the turn or river. But nut potential just means that at some point in the hand you're going to be very confident that you have the best hand, and so your attention can shift completely to how do I get as much money in as possible, and that's a very powerful thing. It also is going to allow you to put that part of your range into the value part of a polarized range, which just has so much value in and of itself, but is not exactly related to the fundamental factors of hand anatomy, if we can call it that. So these are it. This is it, guys. Like nut potential, domination, showdown value, synergy. I mean, this is where the money comes from post flop. This is what makes one hand playable and another hand not playable. There is no other thing that doesn't flow from this. Okay, like yeah, like I said, utility you could call a thing, or how many of these things a hand has, you could call a thing. Blocker effects you could call a thing, although it's not really helping you make money post flop. Um, and I mean, yeah, it's a secondary thing. We'll call it a secondary thing. I would call it a secondary thing. Same with board coverage. Like, I need this hand because it just fills out my range. Okay, well, yeah, sure. But you wouldn't do that you wouldn't use a given hand to fill out your range if the hand didn't have some number of these things going for it in the first place, right? Moving on, moving on. We're just supposed to be touching on these things. How do we construct ranges? So, we can be talking about how do we want to structure our raising, open raising, three betting ranges pre-flop, and we can be talking about post-flop ranges, although I think I'm more keen to call those lines, or think about ranges post-flop with regard to the lines that we're taking. I tend to chunk them that way anyway. So how do we construct ranges? Well, sometimes, yeah, I don't know how much I want to get into this right now, because this is at least a video all on its own. But sometimes I guess you could just say that when you're open raising, you don't want to open raise polar. That doesn't make sense, right? You want to just have some bottom hand, some worst hand of each category in each position, and say I'm going to open this hand. And by defining the worst hand or worst hands in a linear range, you can define the entire range, because we're just opening some cusp hand or hands and everything better than that. And keeping in mind that the worst hand of each kind in each range that you're open raising should break even or about break even. And thinking about why that's the case can get you pretty far. Maybe that could be your homework assignment. So I'm telling you that in each position where you're opening some number of hands and you're not going to open some other number of hands, if you're open raising 8-7 suited from some position at some table, and you've decided that is your cusp hand. You're gonna fold 8-7 offsuit. You're gonna fold 7-6 suited, 8-6 suited. Those are going into the muck, but this is where you've decided. Did I say 8-7 suited? Yeah, like 8-7 suited or whatever the hand is. That's going to be your cusp hand. From this position, you're opening this hand and no worse hands. Why? Because it breaks even. And why is that? Why is that the thing? Well, because if you know that the 8-7 suited is going to break about even, or well, let's say that you're like, well, I don't want to play break even hands. I only want to play hands that make money. Okay, so you just look at some hands and you're like, well, in my database it says that 10-9 suited actually makes money, so I'm going to open that hand. And I'm not going to open any other hands, or any worse hands rather. 10-9 suited is my cutoff, and it's making money. Well, then the problem with that is that you're leaving money on the table, literally. Because if you're opening 10-9 suited and it's a profitable open, then however much it makes, how many big blinds or how many percents of a big blind it makes per 100, say, unless it's like, well, no, I mean, it doesn't even matter. Just whatever number that is, if there's another hand that you could play that makes slightly less, then you're just not making that non-zero amount of money that you could be making. And the only way to make sure that isn't the case is to start with the hands that break even, and go from there up. And that might not sound like such a big deal, and maybe it's not such a big deal, and you might think, yeah, but variance, something like that. Well, there is another part of this equation. It's that the more hands you play, or the more different kinds of hands you play, the more kind of robust each of your ranges is, the more profitable your range at large becomes. So, like, if you can open 8-7 suited under the gun in a 6-max game, which probably is close, but if that breaks even, then you should open it. If that hand breaks even, and maybe that's a loser from, it depends, obviously it depends on a lot of factors. Stack depth, your proficiency, what stakes you're playing, and how good or bad the field is, but let's just say that hand is ace-jack offsuit. That's the hand that breaks even under the gun. Then if you open that and everything better than that, you're not leaving money on the table within that range. Or if, let's say it is 10-9 suited, from whatever position, in whatever situation, if that's the one that breaks even, having that hand in your range helps the other hands make money. It's like, it's better for your overall range. Like, if you are opening 10-9 suited from under the gun, but most of the hands in your range from under the gun are going to be two big cards. If you open this break-even 10-9 suited, and the flop comes, and you get called by the button, say, and the flop comes like ace, king, 9, rainbow, your opponent's going to do a lot of check folding to you, or a lot of folding to your c-bet, because it looks like you hit that range so hard. Well, it doesn't really do you that much good for it to look like you hit that board so hard with your range if you actually do always hit that board with your range. It's like if you literally never have a worse hand than like bottom pair, or second pair, or third pair, then you're not going to get as much mileage as you could out of your range, because you don't have any hands to bluff with. And that means you wasted something somewhere. Continued versus open raising ranges, so you're going to call some, you're going to 3-bet some, you're going to fold some. Generally the best way is to polarize those ranges when it's possible, when you're not going to get punished for it. And you want to be, at least your attempt, the most efficient thing you can do, if given the opportunity to do, is to flat a condensed range and 3-bet the poles. Sometimes you have to depolarize for things we won't get into right now, but to not get punished, and for board coverage, and to not be too easy to play against, basically is the same thing as not getting exploited, and for board coverage. And sometimes you're either going to have to or be able to be linear. And what you'll find if you think about poker strategy hard enough and long enough is that there really is no difference between have to and are able to. Like, it's the same thing. You just do. Um, and so sometimes you will do or be able to or have to or make the most money when you use a linear value only range. Like sometimes you just won't need to bluff. So you should 3-bet, like all your nutted value hands and just call with your other decent hands because your opponent is just not paying attention. Sometimes your opponent's paying a little attention, but he's mostly playing his own hands, and you can just be super polarized. Sometimes your opponent's going to be good, and you should either depolarize or leave the table. Really, you should probably leave the table unless you're playing super high stakes. Anyway, simplicity and efficiency. Guys, all of this comes down to, where does the profit really come from? It sounds so simple, but really that's the goal. That's what we need to zone in. Don't worry about this other crap. If you look at what things are making money, like how are you making money? How are you not losing money? It's just, we just make money. I mean, it's one thing to think of not losing money. And in a sense, that's the same as winning money, in a sense. At least it's going to factor into the overall equation in the same way. But when we're literally talking about making money, we're really talking about getting fold equity. It really is just fold equity and winning at showdown and implied odds. I mean, that's really it. That's all there really is. Like trying to avoid reverse implied odds, trying to put money in where you're not going to win very often at showdown, not putting money in when you're not going to be able to get your opponent to fold. But see, you don't get paid until you are the last player. Like, you don't get paid except for when you drag a pot in. Now, you are paying with all of the money that you put into the pot and don't drag in. But let's leave that aside for a moment. If we're just talking about this side of the equation, like money won less money lost equals money in total. If we look at just the money won side of the equation, we want to make it more likely that we win a pot. So we want to win a lot of pots if possible. I mean, all else equal. And we want to make the pots that we do win as big as possible. And the way that we do that is just to understand money won at showdown and money won without showdown are they're the only things there are to think about. That's it. And our strategy should reflect that. And if your strategy doesn't reflect that, then you're probably either overcomplicating a thing, or maybe you're looking at it too simplistically, but I doubt that. I very much doubt that. You're almost certainly overcomplicating. Because remember, like, getting better at a thing is a daily subtraction. It's a taking away from. It's a simplifying, making more simple, day after day. The thing should start to look easier. And, there is a beginning stage where you're like, wow, I had no idea that poker was so complicated. But that passes. It should pass. And I guess if you stay tuned to the rest of this series, and I think that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to make this a series. What I'm going to try to do for you is exactly that. We're going to go through each one of those things and try to make it as simple as possible. No simpler. It can only be as simple as it is. But it doesn't have to be more complicated than that. And I think it's really echoed what I just said, what I believe, how I think about poker is echoed pretty well in these words. Bruce Lee said, and it's in the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, when I first began martial arts, a punch was just a kick. A punch was just a punch, and a kick was just a kick. When I began improving, a punch became more than just a punch, and a kick was more than just a kick. Now that I've mastered the martial arts, a punch is just a punch, and a kick is just a kick. Until next time, may all your outs be live and all your pots be... No, that's somebody else. Good quote. Let's just do word to your mothers and namaste, bitches.